Hello and welcome to this CIPS Australia and New Zealand podcast mini-series brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Hello, kia ora, and thank you for joining us on the first episode of a special CIPS Futures podcast mini-series brought to you by CIPS ANZ. I'm Charlotte Payne and I'm General Manager ANZ covering Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, and I'm absolutely delighted to be taking the reins as host for a few episodes. So, what are we going to be talking about over the course of this series? As some of you may already know, the Australian Public Service Commission, that's an Australian government agency, launched a new procurement and contract management professional stream back in 2024. In summary, the stream is there to build and establish a professional network and community of procurement and contract management practitioners in the Australian public service. And while the launch of procurement and contract management as a professional stream is an Australian public service initiative, its significance and relevance extends beyond government procurement, impacting all sectors and reaching beyond Australia. CIPS fully supports this initiative, and in this first episode, we'll hear from the appointed co-heads of the Procurement and Contract Management professional stream to find out more about what it's all about. But we'll go beyond just getting underneath the bonnet of the stream's launch in this series. In future episodes, we'll be hearing from practitioners to get their perspectives of how we build capability within public procurement, and most importantly, why a qualified professional procurement and supply community is fundamental to delivering public value, supporting strategic objectives, and strengthening national industry, in this case, Australian industry. We believe that to build long-term capability in Australia and New Zealand, but also globally, the profession must get the message across to others that good procurement is so much more than simply a transactional, process-driven role. Establishing procurement and contract management as a professional stream is a big step in recognising that, but we'll also ask practitioners about why procurement is such an exciting community to be part of, with huge purpose and influence at its very heart. We're going to keep each episode short and snappy, but filled with insight. So let's get going, shall we? Welcome to today's guests, Richard Windeyer and Julia Pickworth. Really excited to have you here. Both are appointed co-heads of the Procurement and Contract Management profession, launched in 2024. They're jointly responsible for championing capability within the profession and driving strong partnerships and collaboration to bring together government officials. But that's certainly enough for me for now. I'll let you both introduce yourselves. I don't know, Richard, would you like to go first and just share a little bit about yourself, your background, and your current responsibility?
Charlotte, thank you, and lovely to be here. So I'm a Deputy Secretary in the Australian Department of Finance, looking after, amongst other things, procurement, and as a result, lucky enough to be one of the co-heads of the recently established procurement profession here in Australia. I've been a long-time servant of the Australian government, working in various departments for the last 25 plus years in different areas, most of which in the telecommunications and media policy space, and have come to this role in the Department of Finance and into this world of procurement over the last 12 months.
A warm welcome to the world of procurement. Julia, over to you to do the same.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yes, lovely to be here. So I am a Deputy Secretary in the Australian Department of Industry, Science and Resources, and I lead our industry and commercialisation group. So we've got a range of programs and policies and regulatory functions and analysis in there. And we engage a lot with business and industry and market. So like Richard, I've worked in a range of departments and roles across the Commonwealth, and one of the great honours of working in the public service is that it's a grand team sport, and we've got people and systems that collectively deliver for Australia. And so that's certainly the lens that we're bringing with this profession, and it's around trying to make sure that we make things better and that we drive change, and that's in both big and small ways, and it's both in what we do and how we do it. So it's lovely to join you today.
Thank you. I'll perhaps go to Richard first, but by all means, Julia, feel free to weigh in. Before we dive into the new procurement and contract management professional stream, perhaps you could give us a potted history of the APS professional streams, why they were introduced, and what others are out there.
So the APS professional streams were established, I think, back in about 2019 as part of a broader initiative to try and strengthen overall capability in a number of critical areas across the public service, noting that governments are large, public service is a large employer, devolved across many different agencies and doing a very wide variety of tasks. But there are some capability areas or disciplines where there is a degree of consistency that we are interested in, and a degree of capability that we want to make sure is embedded across that large employer group spread across the country. So the idea is in their particular areas, they're designed to try and attract, develop and retain relevant specialists to support the APS being in a position to deliver high quality services on behalf of the government for the people of Australia. In some contexts, they were designed to focus on areas where there were known to be skill shortages, as in shortages of skills inside the public sector. In other areas, they're probably looking to focus on areas where it's about building expertise and knowledge. But I think in some respects, one of the most important parts of them was the professionalisation piece, and both professionalising the practice in the particular discipline, but also trying to build a career opportunity and provide a sort of sense of value and opportunity for people that are working in those disciplines across the public service.
Great. And a lot of that certainly resonates from what I hear from the profession across Australia, New Zealand, and indeed further. Julia.
So across the public service, we currently have 6 professional streams. So one of them obviously being procurement and contract management, but we joined 3 existing professional streams. So the originals, or as my children would say, the OG, of human resources, digital and data, all fairly self-explanatory. And then the 2 other new streams that were recently launched is evaluation and complex project management. So there's now 6 streams. And as Richard was saying, there's a piece about the professionals and the specialists within those streams. There's also a function around the professionalisation of core capabilities for the public service. And so part of the thinking is, if we do these things well and we value them, that we're better public servants and we deliver better for Australia. And Rich and I often say that, and also our future selves will be glad. So there's this piece about what we're doing now that's protecting both ourselves and the future of the public service in doing these jobs really well and valuing that skill set.
Yeah, that really resonates with the profession and what procurement and supply professionals repeatedly tell us. I guess I'm really interested in what specifically is it about procurement and contract management that really commands that focus on building capability. Julia, perhaps you'd like to take that one.
So I think at the high level, procurement obviously matters, and the practice of how we do it matters. And so why a profession? It's that we want to ensure that procurement professionals are equipped with the tools and skills they need, that the public service values their expertise and their practice, and that we can grow careers and platform the great opportunities and the great work that happens within the public service every day. And so one of the things that really anchors us, obviously, is around value for money. And that's about being very sophisticated about what that is. It's not as simple as price. It's looking at broader benefits, whole of life costs, quality of goods and services, flexibility of the proposal. And so it's about ensuring that we've got the capability and the right knowledge and the expertise to do that. And one of the things that we're very conscious of is that procurement's both an opportunity and a risk in the public service. And often for procurement professionals, they're engaging with people who are not procurement professionals. So how do we lift and elevate the whole? And I think that's part of why this profession now.
And it builds on the fact that procurement is a very, very large part of the government's activities. We're talking in the Australian context, close to $100 billion annually through the procurement system, more than 84,000 contracts in the year. So there's simply a lot of activity. Julia mentioned the fact that there are a lot of people that in a sense are engaged in the procurement space that are not necessarily seeing themselves as procurement professionals. It's also the case that when you've got that volume of activity, you've got a lot of people engaging with the market, with suppliers. And in a world where one of the big pressures on government and people working in governments is integrity and is accountability and is transparency, making sure that we've equipped our people to be able to operate well and professionally and effectively in that environment where they're dealing with a very broad range of suppliers across a very broad range of types of services is really important, because if it's not done well, as Julia says, it carries risk and it goes poorly. And the final thing I think I would add is that not only is there a lot of stuff and services procured, procurement is also inevitably, and not just in Australia, a tool or an extension of government policy in a number of areas. So there are policies in the Australian context which we would like to make sure are advanced, or at very least procurement is operating consistently with. And again, that is another reason why it seems in our minds important to actually professionalise the practice of procurement, and not forget make it a poor cousin, the contract management part of the title as well, which is sort of oft forgotten but probably just as important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm interested in a number of people have asked me, why are there two co-heads for the procurement and contract management profession?
So one of the things Richard mentioned at the start, that his group in finance leads procurement kind of policy and rules across government. And so there's huge value and connection through that. One of the reasons for the co-heads was to provide some different lenses. So the new professions have all got co-heads. And one of the things I think that was a learning from the originals was that it's good to get different perspectives at the head of the profession. And so in my current role, and I've seen a lot of my experience, it has been engaging with business and industry in the market. And so one of the things was to bring the insights of this department, my group, around engaging with the market, engaging with industry, and to try and build the public services confidence to engage with the market and with industry. And the other reason was, departments of industry, science, research, we're affectionately referred to as line departments, so we're not a central agency. And so that brings insight and experience from being a department that's got a wide range of procurements ourselves. So we have procurements that span mine remediation. We recently procured a humanoid robot for Questacon. So the diversity of what this department's doing means we have really rich lived experience of how things are going. It also means that we can deploy and experiment with things within our own department, which we've been doing over the last year or so. We've been really leaning into building our own capability and systems within this department. So I think that's part of the why two versus one head of profession.
It's also the case that the Department of Finance, whilst it owns procurement policy, is not by any means the primary procurer inside government. And so it's very helpful and, frankly, I think sends a useful signal across the service that we recognise the need to have the professions led by people that have to, frankly, follow the rules that we here in the Department of Finance are setting out. I mean, while finance undertakes a number of whole of government procurements in a variety of areas, the vast bulk of the contracts, for example, of those 83,000 contracts I mentioned, are not obviously with the Department of Finance. So we're in the luxurious position of getting to write the rules, but then it's important that we see and have involved in the professions people that actually have to live by and operate within those frameworks. And that does bring, I suspect, as someone who was in a loan agency until relatively recently, does bring a different and useful perspective. Most of the public service is not central agencies. So it is very helpful and very, as Julia says, it's now rolled across all of the new professions having two leads. In our case here, having a non-central agency lead, I think, is particularly valuable.
Really helpful background. It really contextualises the launch of the professional streams and the purpose to that end. Let's think about now how that will impact current procurement and contract management professionals. What new opportunities will there be? And I guess, how do they get involved or embrace these opportunities?
So the first thing is important to say is the establishment of the profession is not a reflection on the lack of capability and professionalism of people that are working diligently and very hard across the Australian government doing procurement. It's more a case of people that might once have felt they were a lonely voice inside an agency operating on procurement now have access to a network of friends and colleagues and peers who are experiencing the same sort of challenges in their context, who are trying to deal with the same sort of things, who are grappling with the same sort of frustrating rules established by the Department of Finance, and also a chance to see people who have forged a career working in the space to give them a sense of what they might look to do next. So I think that is important, that this is not because the system or the people in the system are not doing a good job at all. It's actually about lifting and improving capability and making sure we've got a pipeline of people coming through. Probably, therefore, the two most important pieces of the profession in my mind would be, one, the opportunity for connection and networking, and that then leads to understanding and getting a sense of camaraderie and collaboration and opportunities for one's career. And the second is access to and sort of visibility of a range of training and professional development opportunities that can help promote better practice or knowledge sharing about how best to go about procurement. The sort of primary opportunity, there's a community of practice that's been established that's got a couple of thousand people in it and continues to grow. That's probably the sort of first collaboration or networking opportunity. The thing I would say about that is it's not necessarily just people that spend 100% of their day doing procurement. One of the points we're very conscious of is across the Australian public service, there are a lot of public servants that had touched the procurement system but wouldn't class themselves as procurement officers. So we are trying to appeal to those that engage in procurement practice, as well as those who see themselves and would like to see themselves as procurement professionals. And so the community of practice and the opportunities that brings for collaboration and knowledge sharing is really important. On the capability and training side, there are a range of activities that are being led out of the Department of Finance and some out of the Public Service Commission or with the assistance of the Public Service Commission to establish a program of professional development courses tapping into a variety of points in the procurement journey. We have recently launched an internal to government program to train early stage public servants looking to become procurement professionals. That's a training opportunity that leads to a recognised Cert 4 qualification. And that seems to me is kind of the perfect demonstration of moving from a thing that we did well to a thing that we are looking to see as a professional endeavour if we're now offering people courses which lead to a recognised qualification.
There's certainly information through the APS Professions website. So that's obviously the sort of the 6 professions, but there's stuff there on the procurement and contract management profession. There is a range of training courses. Richard and I recently did one together on the SES training for procurement. And there's the community of practice that Richard mentioned really provided a huge platform for the profession and the profession's launch. And that continues at pace and has a lot of connections and experience and resources amongst the members there. And I think the other thing would be just to note that Richard mentioned it, the initiatives are designed to be inclusive, whether you identify as a procurement professional or a contract management professional or not. And so one of the things is to try and really equip all of us in the public service to be thinking about procurement earlier and in a more sophisticated way than some parts of the public service have when you don't do it all the time, versus people who are procurement professionals who are highly skilled in their craft and able to support people who don't do it every day. The other thing just to add is around, we have a working group. When we launched the profession, there's a working group and that brings together people from, I think, around 29 different parts of the public service, both big and small, and they are kind of co-designing and shaping the strategy for the profession. So Rich and I are very much, we recognise that we're heads of the profession. We also recognise what we don't know and that there's huge expertise in the public service. And so the strategy and the next steps for the profession are being shaped as we go through this year.
And a key part of that shaping is going to be actually understanding who's out there. So one of the early tasks that in the early days of the profession we're looking to do is to actually map the landscape and get a handle on how many people across the public service are involved in procurement or involved in contract management. Because whilst we've got a couple of thousand people associated with the community of practice at the moment, it's very hard to say how big should that get. How many people are involved in procurement and how many people are involved in contract management is a question that we don't currently have an answer to. So the profession is young and new, and one of the early things that it's looking to do is to understand how big the potential membership, as it were, might look like by trying to get a good picture of the procurement landscape across the various agencies of government.
Super interesting. And as an aside, CIPS is also grappling with that. What's the size of the profession question? And I'll certainly share the outcomes of some independent research that we've undertaken. And yes, it will have made some assumptions and there will be some limitations, but it is a good starting point. We touched upon the future. So I guess I'm interested in jumping on a rocket and heading off into the future to really understand a little bit about what's your vision for procurement and contract management professional stream. What do you want it to do? What would you like your future selves to see? Maybe that's a 5-year horizon or maybe indeed longer. Over to you, perhaps, Julia, to pick up on that one.
In terms of the definition of success from a year of the profession, which will be later this year, and I'll throw to Richard to do the longer time horizon perhaps. So we're very keen to have an embedded profession with a clear employee value proposition. So people are able to grow their careers, build their toolbox, and the practice is valued. And we want to make sure that we as a profession are engaging with obviously the professionals of procurement and contract management, but also having an eye to the people who don't identify as professionals, but also people who are decision makers and the market. And so there's sort of 3 things that I think we're particularly looking at is the profile. So that's around the career pathways, which Richard mentioned before about growing careers and including people moving mid-career into a professional procurement practice. The second one would be capability. So that's of all of us, the procurement and the contract management professionals, but also the non-professionals. And so it's making sure that we're all doing best practice. And the third thing's, I think, around leadership. And part of that is having the sort of confidence and collaborative leadership across the public service about procurement and contract management, and that confidence to engage with the market and with each other so that we all get stronger and better and that we're better able to deliver on the objectives of government and deliver for the Australian people.
Building on that, I think the thing I would be looking for in 5 years' time is, or amongst other things in 5 years' time, would be hoping that the feedback we get from the supplier community reflects the fact that they feel they are engaging with a professional, fair, engaged and expert group of public servants who are undertaking procurements. Success is not going to be that every supplier is happy with us, because that makes no sense. But success may well be that we are seen, we, the public sector, is seen as a good, consistent, reliable party to do business with, and that the people that are being engaged with are professional and have a high degree of expertise and are comfortable and confident engaging with the market and with suppliers. I think the second dimension for me in 5 years' time is that the world of procurement, people that practice procurement have a degree of influence and prominence within the public sector, so that it is something that is recognised by public service leaders as a valuable part of what their agency does, that it is recognised there are people working in the public service that you can go to for high quality advice on how best to engage with suppliers, how best to structure a sourcing process, how best to manage a contract over the longer term. I guess the other thing would be that the public service is an attractive employer, and that we are seen as a place where people that might be aspiring to be procurement professionals are seeing the public service as a place where they have a future and they have an interesting future. I mean, one of the things the public service can offer is we procure some pretty weird stuff. Julia's talked about robots. You can be procuring submarines in some places. You can be procuring everything in the services space, from dentists and doctors to people that are, expert in the world of almost any discipline you imagine. So the public sector is an interesting opportunity, and making it an attractive employer for people that see themselves as procurement professionals or would aspire to that, I think is really quite important. So the recognition piece, both for potential employers and for leaders inside the sector, and the recognition by suppliers that we are good and professional with high degrees of integrity and accountability to deal with is, I think, what I'd be looking for.
I'm just going to add one more thing. I think when we were thinking about and in talking to people about the profession is how do we link the profession to the purpose and to the outcomes and to the satisfaction of trying to make things better. And so Richard's talked about the public service and the huge range of roles that we all do. And I think part of it is that procurement and contract management being seen as an enabler. And it's a way to drive impact, and it's a frontline tool in doing that. And it's super cool. Like there's an element of like it's just a great kind of lever that is within every department and within a lot of people's roles. And I think sometimes we in the public service think of some of those roles as being I think someone said to me that procurement can often be described as a difficult necessity. And I think it's about making sure that we're all having the conversations and thinking about it up front and then being able to get the power out of it. Because if it's become a difficult necessity or a sort of irritant, which sometimes it can be for everybody in the system, including procurement professionals and the decision makers, that means we're not hitting the mark and the whole system isn't working well to use the lever as well as we could.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for sharing your vision. It's certainly something that aligns and resonates with CIPS as the global professional body. I guess that brings me to really how can CIPS support? What would you like to see from CIPS as the global professional body for procurement and supply?
We see CIPS as a key part of our professional membership program within the profession. And I think we've had a partnership with CIPS since late 2024. And in some respects, what I would say is we're keen for that to continue and keen for CIPS to remain a significant, respected, globally recognised professional body. That's why we're interested in being in a position to work with CIPS because of what you currently bring. I guess the things that we see CIPS offering that we would like to think our members of our profession and public servants can build upon are, one, the various events and thus opportunities for, again, networking and expanding people's horizons and understanding of what's possible in the broad world of procurement is one piece. A second piece is access to a degree of knowledge and expertise and what's going on in places beyond our own narrow horizon. So there is more to procurement than just the public sector, and there are things we can learn from others. So as a repository of knowledge around procurement and how it is practiced in a variety of different industry sectors and even in a variety of different governments, I think we would see that the knowledge piece of CIPS is really and potentially really valuable to our people. And the final piece for me is there are obviously important training and skills development opportunities that CIPS looks to run. And I think we're in the early days of the profession, but are going to be expecting of people and encouraging people that they do need to think about and should be supported in looking to further their professional development. And we would be looking for opportunities for our people to be able to take advantage of some of the training and qualifications that are offered through professional bodies such as CIPS. So it's not very remarkable to say that what we would see CIPS doing is doing what it currently does, and what we're interested in is working out how we can tap into that in a way that works for government procurement professionals.
I think one of the things that CIPS can help us with is certainly the access to and leveraging the expertise and resources of CIPS. So we've obviously got lots of expertise in the public service, but it's always good to be able to leverage others' expertise and resources. And I think there's a piece about the platforming and valuing of the profession that CIPS can help us with. And sort of across both of those things, I think it's around the tools in the toolkit and how do we make sure that we've all got the tools that we need in the toolkit, and how do we learn from others and link in with others and collaborate to have most impact.
Love it. Well, we're very willing and able to support and have to say fully support the launch of procurement and contract management as a professional stream. It really is such an important milestone for the profession, not only within Australian public service, actually more broadly into private sector and beyond the shores of Australia. So really, really excited to have reached that milestone, but there's more to do. I guess that brings us to a bit of a wrap up. What's your message now for those working in procurement and contract management roles?
Richard mentioned it before, so obviously we've got deep expertise in the public service, and this is about knitting that expertise together and growing it and valuing it and platforming it. And I think if we can collectively do that, then the public service is stronger and able to better deliver for the Australian people.
Join the profession and find a friend is kind of the message I'd be keen for anyone playing in procurement in the Commonwealth public service to be taking away. The launch of the profession is a chance, hopefully, for people that are doing a tremendous job but might otherwise feel disconnected from or curious about where the other people doing their kind of job are in the service. This is the chance to find a bunch of people that are doing similar things and tap into a bunch of supports to A, to feel valued, and B, to give opportunities to expand your expertise and forge a procurement or contract management career path in the public service.
Well, thank you both. Really enjoyed the conversation with you and really appreciate you both giving up your time to join us to share what the new Australian Public Service procurement and contract management stream is all about.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, Charlotte.
So that's it from the first episode of this mini-series. Fantastic to hear from both Julia and Richard there. It's an exciting time for the profession, and from our perspective at CIPS, we fully support the APS initiative and programme to develop a highly effective public sector procurement community. We've got more to come on this topic, though, throughout this podcast mini-series. We'll be following this conversation with the thoughts of procurement practitioners themselves. Next episode, we'll be joined by the inspiring Jane Wagner and a member of her team. Jane was named CIPS Procurement and Supply Leader in 2023 and is currently working in the Australian Government Department of Health and Aged Care. We'll continue the theme of this mini-series with Jane, exploring the expected impact of the procurement and contract management professional stream, why we need to build procurement capability in the public sector, and how we can practically do so. Don't forget, CIPS is here to help with all of this. Get in touch with us to find out how we can support your career journey and to find out about our upcoming events. This podcast has been brought to you by CIPS, the Chartered Institute for Procurement and Supply.